we go. Welcome back to another edition of the Soccer Specialist Podcast. And today we're going to talk about two very simple but very important things that U.S. soccer players can do to help with their development. These things can be greatly encouraged and supported by parents and coaches, but ultimately these are things that players have under their control, and it's going to be up to them whether they embrace them and take them on as part of their development or not. And as anyone listening to this knows, and a lot of people I've talked to, there are so many things that seem to need fixing in terms of the U.S. youth soccer development system. Whether it's the type of training, the quality of the training, pay to play, national team scouting, all the different leagues, needing more good coaches, et cetera, et cetera. And these are all things that just seem almost impossible for us to take charge of and have any influence on, right? So we either don't get involved for that reason, or we also think these are things that we're not going to be able to change while our kids are playing, right? For parents and even coaches who have children playing, that's going to take 10 or 15 years or what have you. However, maybe two of the biggest and most important things in youth development for soccer don't need any of that kind of top down change. We don't need to change the minds of the different organizations and leagues and U.S. soccer and all that. Instead, it can be taken on by coaches, parents, and players all on their own. Nothing else has to change. These are just things that we need to do. Two things that are done overwhelmingly in the rest of the soccer world, but you don't really see enough here. And I know we have some really serious players and parents that are listening, and they'll say, "Well, we do that," which is great, but I think we all know you're pretty much the exception to the rule, right? And number one is playing soccer. And what I mean by this is we don't have a street soccer culture like you do in, say, Brazil is probably the biggest one talking about, but anywhere in the world. I remember a few years ago, I was talking to a father of one of the kids on a younger team at our club, and he was from Italy originally. And we got onto that discussion about the differences over here. And he said that was one of the biggest ones. He said, over there, young kids that play soccer, they have a ball all the time. They're always out playing. If they're not playing, they're dribbling it around the house, wherever it may be, but they're always playing on their own, right? Johan Cruyff, the famous Dutch player, he once said that he got 4 hours of training a week. Um, at the academy, and he played 4 hours on his own every day, and said, where do you think his soccer playing ability and his creativity came from, right? And we don't have that over here. You don't see kids out playing soccer, and we need that for kids. And we'll get into that in a little bit. I just want to name number two because they kind of tie together. And the other one we don't do in America is watch soccer. These kids, overwhelmingly, I know some do, but overwhelmingly, these kids do not watch the game on television. And today, that opportunity is everywhere. You go back 20, 30 years ago, you couldn't find soccer on TV in America, but now it's everywhere. So there really aren't any excuses. And again, just like the playing in Europe, these kids grow up watching soccer, not just playing it all the time, but watching it all the time. They probably see more soccer by the time they're 8 or 9 years old than our kids do in a lifetime. And it is crucial to development to watch the game. I remember a seminar Anton Dorrance, the famous UNC coach, was doing, and going through some drills and games that he does with his team, and mentioned, I can't remember the guy's name right now, but it was someone who was pretty high up at the time in the development system in Germany, who came over here to help in America, and was a big believer in letting the game be the teacher, right? It was a big thing, letting the game teach the players. And then he was here for a little while, and he realized that that was not going to work in America. Why? Because we don't watch soccer. The players, they can't let the game be the teacher in what they're doing, because they have no concept in what is successful in soccer in terms of the moving off the ball and everything else, because they don't watch it, right? And in watching it, you start to understand the patterns of play and switching field and the vision to see passes that maybe on the field, as a player who doesn't watch the game, struggles to see as they're learning, right? Decision making. which is huge. I think that's one of our bigger problems at the higher levels is not so much technical, although that's a problem, but our decision making lags behind our soccer IQ because we haven't played the game enough as kids and we haven't watched the game enough, right? And so to go back briefly to the playing soccer, I get that this may take coaches and parents getting involved, not just in encouraging their kids to go play, but in, I know this sounds a little contradictory, but in organizing free play. An example of what I mean that I've done with my team before is in the summer, we get them out for a day. We say it's going to be 3 hours or whatever it is, and get as many of the kids in the team that we can, and then we randomly put them into teams of two. If you have a lot of players, maybe you go with three and a sub. We did it. It worked out. We had last time we did it had 2v2, and I set up a few different fields just using the small pug goals and playing like in a 30 by 20 or 25 by 15 or however you want to do it. And I wrote it up like a tournament. Right, we did brackets. They were played round robin, teams advance, and we did, I think, maybe, since we were playing a number of games, I think maybe it was 12 or 15, maybe 20-minute games. If we did 20, it's probably 10-minute halves, but 12 or 15 if you have teams of two without subs. And then I would keep track of the schedule for them and who they're playing and the wins and losses to see who would advance. But that was it. It was all them. I even told them, I said, if you don't even want me to watch, I'll go over there and do whatever, and you come tell me the result. Because there was going to be no coaching. They didn't have coaches. They had each other. So it was, yeah, it took some of the adults to kind of organize this and get it together. But ultimately, it was just completely the players. I gave them no instructions, nothing. I just watched, and I was just there to keep it going for them. So that's one thing you might want to do. You just have to make sure that the adults that are going to be there are involved to kind of oversee it, aren't involved in any way in teaching or whatever. This is completely for the kids, and it might be a way to get them to play more than they would otherwise, and get them that opportunity to work it all out on their own and develop and understand creativity and working with the teammates and figuring things out, because there's no coaching to give them pointers of what to do if something's going wrong or what have you. And even teammates, they have to work it out together, right? Pickup games, sometimes you get that player who doesn't want to play any defense, things like that. So it's good for them in a lot of ways. And I think the best example to kind of understand this a little better in America is basketball, right? And the kids who play basketball, and I don't mean even organized, right? Out on the courts all the time, pickup games and everything. They learn so much by doing that. But those same kids actually watch a lot of basketball, right? Then they go out to the courts and they try and imitate what they've seen their favorite players do, right? And they mess up a lot and they do stupid stuff, but they're constantly playing without coaching, and they're constantly watching to learn, and then they're taking that out to the court to try it, which we're just not seeing in soccer. It's a different animal over here in America, um, and it's really important for them to be able to do that. They're just going to learn things that they will not learn in a structured environment. Um, and I understand. I think I said at the beginning about the big changes that probably need to be made, and how overwhelming that can be, and we seem like we don't have any impact at all. But something like this, just playing it and watching it, can be huge for the development of our kids. We don't need the big bureaucracies in U.S. soccer to get involved in this type of stuff. And if you can get your kid to watch it more, you can get your kid outside playing, even if it's getting another kid. I remember when I was younger, some of my friends on my team, we would clear out the basement in somebody's house, and at the time it was, what we would use would be, if you remember these, right, a Nerf ball. We'd use a Nerf soccer ball. We'd play 1v1 for hours in somebody's basement, and you have to avoid the metal pole holding up the ceiling and things like that. But it was a big part of development. You get a lot of touches on the ball in a competitive environment, decision making, and all that. So I think that's really important. And to give you a quick example, I kind of missed it just in closing when I was talking about watching. One time last spring when I was out setting up for my team to arrive, and there was another team on the field next to it, not having started practice yet, so players that were early and goofing around and talking. and they got into talking about that. And I just remember a few of the players saying how they never watch soccer. You know, they watch basketball and they watch football. They never watch soccer. If you're a soccer player and you want to be the best player you can be, you must watch soccer, right? And actually, hopefully that wasn't too long. I went a little longer than I thought. I think I lost my place once or twice, but that's okay. I recovered and made my way through. So parents and coaches, you can encourage these two things amongst your players. Players that are listening, you can go out and do this, right? Get your friends, bug them, figure it out. Get your parents to do play dates or whatever it is that you do, and do it for soccer, even if it's just 1v1, 2v2, whatever it is, and start watching games. There's more soccer on television in America than there's ever been. There's no excuse to not be able to watch games because you can't find them. And that is it for this episode of the Soccer Specialist podcast. Why do I keep saying podcast? That's not right. Podcast, right? So I appreciate you listening. You can go to thesoccerspecialist.com/podcast to find it's available on anchor.fm/soccer specialist. It's also available on Spotify and iTunes, and you can find those links. Actually, if you go to anchor.fm/the soccer specialist, you will find the links for iTunes as or Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you in the next episode.